Well. Would you look at that? ESPN finally has decided that BYU is a college football playoff team. Yes, indeed they have. Stop the presses. I know. I hope you were sitting down when you learned of that news. But not only that, ESPN has two Big 12 teams in the college football playoff. I'm going to give you that info, give you who they have in the top 25, and discuss what changed. What does this mean? Also, ESPN has one projection with the Oklahoma State Cowboys in the college football playoff. Okay, so I suppose when I say make sure you're sitting down, you should be sitting down for that one as well. The theory here being that Oklahoma State could be the next Indiana. Now, this has been something I've kicked around for a while, bringing this topic up like, hey, Indiana should be inspiring to the Big 12, right? Is it that inspiring that Oklahoma State can go from 1-11 to all of a sudden making the college football playoff? Once again, ESPN, don't take it up with me. Take it up with ESPN. I've got one other team I think could be that type of a story from the Big 12 as well. Our recruiting rankings rigged. We have another example of that, and I've shied away from this topic at points in the past, but it's a pretty blatant example of it. Plus, we got a college football playoff update from Brett McMurphy. It is hilarious. Lots of great quotes, especially if you are not fond of the SEC and the Big Ten. But it also has one potentially damning statement in it from Brett Yormark. So I do want to get into that. Let's go. I know I've got a Venmo comment to get to, which I will start the show off with in just a moment. It's John-Kurtz-4. If you're not watching live, you want to submit a super chat on Venmo. I will get to it to start the show. Fill up the regular chat, but if you submit a super chat by clicking the $ below the chat box, you will ensure that your question or comment makes it on the show tonight. I appreciate everybody who contributes in that way, but there are plenty of free ways to support the work that I'm doing here on the channel. All you've got to do is like the video, subscribe to the channel. We are pushing toward 30,000 subscribers, and I appreciate each and every one of you. And it's very helpful to me if you do subscribe. This is the Open for Business Big 12 podcast. Failed to mention that earlier. I am your host, John Kurtz. This is where the Big 12 just means more, my friends. All right, let's start with Andrew, who does have the Venmo comment here, and I laugh because he's you're gonna know what team Andrew is a fan of here. So he says, John, with the transfer portal dying down, which team in the Big 12 made the biggest improvements, and why won't it be enough to take down my Red Raiders? So Andrew, a Tech fan, obviously thinking that I suppose that Texas Tech would be number one on this list. They certainly are if you're going by different transfer portal rankings. Let's see. I would actually tell you, speaking of Oklahoma State, I think Oklahoma State is perhaps next on that list, at least in terms of the gap that they just made up, the ground that they covered in the transfer portal this offseason. I think you can put Oklahoma State up with about anybody in the country because they got so much better with what they're bringing in predominantly from North Texas. But Houston also has a top 10 class, according to On3 at least. They have the number 7 ranked portal class in the country. It goes Indiana, LSU, Texas Tech, Texas A&M, Louisville, Virginia Tech, Houston, Arkansas, Texas, Notre Dame. That's your top 10. Now, if I were to change this to the Big 12, Texas Tech, best class, Houston, second best, BYU, third, Arizona, fourth, West Virginia, fifth. So there's your top 5. They don't even have Oklahoma State in the top 5. Oklahoma State took 54 transfers, okay? That's a lot. I think Oklahoma State should be higher up on that list. I would have Tech, Houston, Oklahoma State, BYU as like my group. If you're asking me for a group of who has improved the most, I would have that group. Now, is it going to be enough to beat Texas Tech? I don't know that yet, but I will say this, Andrew. I think the gap has closed from last year between BYU and Tech, and a part of that is just the continuity that BYU is going to have this year. So I've talked about that recently on the show if you've been watching, but I appreciate your support of the channel, Andrew. If you want to be like Andrew, it is John-Kurtz-4 on Venmo to contribute there. So, okay, let's talk a little bit about the next college football season. If you want some college basketball, by the way, make sure you subscribe to the Open for Business Big 12 newsletter. It's coming out tomorrow. We got a little bit of Big 12 basketball in there. Obviously, College Game Day coming up this weekend with KU and BYU. But speaking of the Cougars, after ESPN tried its hardest to keep BYU out of the college football playoff this past year and the past 2 seasons, they've done the unthinkable. ESPN has predicted 2 Big 12 teams, including BYU, to make the college football playoff field in 2026. In this video, I'll tell you what changed, how likely it is to actually come true, and the 2 SEC teams that pretty hilariously got left out at the expense of BYU and another Big 12 team. So it was not that long ago. You don't have to think that far back to remember what it seemed like, or when it seemed like BYU had 0 chance to make the college football playoff, despite being 11-1 heading into the Big 12 championship game, only loss to a top 10 team. And for a second straight year, BYU just had an objectively better resume than teams in front of it. Of course, 2024, those of you who are around for that, how many times have I talked about the Miami one was the one that drove me nuts? And I know they didn't make the field, but they were certainly right in the thick of the conversation. BYU had a better strength of schedule, strength of record, a better win. It was over a team in Miami's conference, and it didn't matter at all. BYU was not even considered. Then this year, BYU and Notre Dame, right? They're like the last 2 teams left out there, but there's all this discussion about Notre Dame. There's virtually none about BYU, to the point where BYU got left off the graphics. You didn't think I was going to let you forget, ESPN coming back around here, that BYU could not even make the graphics last year. They could not. Shout out to Box Score FB for helping us preserve this lovely moment in time from the past season. Do you see what ESPN is doing? BYU, not there among all these 2-loss teams. And they literally had to put a note in one of these graphics like, oh, by the way, BYU was in there between Alabama and Miami. But yeah, don't worry about it. They're not on the graphic. Don't ask questions. Don't ask questions. Okay, that's what BYU has been dealing with. But apparently, no more. Because we got a way too early top 25 from ESPN. It's Mark Schlabach who was in charge of doing this, but then even Bill Connolly was taking that and using it in his piece about projecting the 2026 college football playoff field. And man, my friends, as Bob Dylan once said, the times they are a-changing. We've got 5 Big 12 teams ranked, one of which is not even Houston, which is a bit offensive to me, one of which is not Arizona, which is a bit offensive to me. So you've got 7 teams that I would say are certainly worthy of being included in all of that. But Texas Tech is number 7. BYU is number 11. TCU is number 20. Arizona State 23. Utah 25. So if you're keeping track there, you've got 2 teams in the top 12, and you have a college football playoff format this year that will not, it's going to prevent having, in all likelihood, you would think, the same scenario we had this year with a couple of G5 teams in, which would mean if you're at 11, you'd be left out. That's where Notre Dame was this past year. BYU would be in the field as it stands with this. Now, what does Mark Schlabach like about TCU? He mentioned he likes the fact that they added UConn's offensive coordinator, thinks they're bringing more toughness to the offense with Kendall Briles gone, a more physical style of offense. I think, okay. And, TCU's been a team that's going to win 8+ games virtually every single year. Arizona State, leaning on Kenny Dillingham being a stud, basically, and liking the portal haul, despite, they detail in there how many players that you're just losing, like your front line. You play the toughest schedule in the league, including a non-con game at Texas A&M. There's a lot that's tricky there. Utah, number 25, a lot of talk about Wayshawn Parker and Devin Dampier, leaning heavily into that. But as far as Texas Tech goes, still in the top 10 at number 7. This is honestly a pretty kind projection for the Big 12. Texas Tech's number 1 ranked transfer portal class helped it win its first outright conference title since 1955. The Red Raiders went back into the portal to reload, which figures to happen every season as long as there's natural gas and oil in the Lone Star State. Brendan Sorsby was the biggest pickup after Tech's offense flopped in the Orange Bowl. Cameron Dickey and Jacoby Williams are returning, and the Red Raiders grabbed a trio of speedy receivers out of the portal. The losses on defense are enormous, starting with Bailey, Hunter, and Height up front. But Mateen, oh boy, I had this down earlier. The Wake Forest defensive tackle, Mateen Ibigaba. I think that's right. Mateen Ibigaba, ESPN's number one rated interior defensive lineman, and White and Tick were highly ranked on the edge. So they got another really good defensive line class. That's what you need to know. Also says the Red Raiders will be counting on Austin Romaine to fill in for the irreplaceable Jacob Rodriguez. Look, if you look at the Texas Tech front line that they are replacing, that I think is where you'll say, hey, Mark Schlabach on ESPN giving Tech a lot of love here, a lot of credit, a lot of benefit of the doubt, man, because David Bailey, Romello Height, Lee Hunter, Jacob Rodriguez, Bryce Ramirez. Remember the Big 12 championship game, right? Like these are some studs that are gone from that defense. But I think the hope with Texas Tech and what Mark Schlabach is kind of getting at here is that the offense will be better to offset some of the losses on defense. And you still did recruit a very good portal class on the defensive side of the football. You combine that with, I know some Tech fans have bristled at this. I've said, hey, don't blame Tech for the schedule, but it is a little soft. It is a little soft. I mean, I will stand by that. It is, and that'll help here in terms of where you're ranked. I think most people would anticipate they're going to run the table in the regular season. I really like what Tech did with Malcolm Simmons, a receiver, the Auburn kid, who had some really explosive plays late in the season against Alabama, if you watch that game. Dante Lee, receiver from Liberty. Like, I think there's plenty of reason, along with Sorsby, to believe they'll be a lot better on offense. So now we turn to BYU, a team that ESPN has in the college football playoff, according to this. Please do subscribe to the channel, by the way. Helps me out a lot. We're getting close to 30K, and like the video, totally free. This is what it says about BYU. The Cougars won 11 games or more for the second straight season, and their biggest victory might have been locking up Coach Kalani Sitake, who turned down Penn State to remain at his alma mater. The Cougars have a good core of star players. Quarterback Bear Bachmeier and tailback LJ Martin lead the way on offense. BYU signed a trio of experienced transfers to shore up its offensive line, and they'll help open holes for Martin, who led the Big 12 with 1,300-plus rushing yards in 2025. Two of the top three receivers must be replaced. Defensive coordinator Jay Hill and cornerbacks coach Genario Guilford left to join Kyle Whittingham's staff in Michigan. Sitake promoted special teams coordinator, defensive end coach Kelly Papinga to lead the defense. Interesting to me that there's a lot more talk about the offense there when I thought, look, it's huge to have Bear Bachmeier and LJ Martin back. I get it. Like, one of the best freshman quarterbacks we've ever seen is coming back, and LJ Martin, the offensive player of the year in the league, is coming back. John, of course, they're going to talk about the offense. Like, okay, I do get it. Parker Kingston, by the way, let's not forget him. I get it. I understand. I'm with you. But I thought it was such a huge win. All those guys they got back on the defensive side of the ball kept the whole crew intact. Johnson, Glasker, Tanavasa, like all these dudes on the defensive side of the ball coming back. And then, you lose Jack Kelly, who's going to go be a stud at the next level, and you bring in Cade Uluwave. I'm so bad with these names today, guys. I'm sorry. Cade Uluwave from Cal. I mean, arguably, to some people, the best linebacker in the portal. Like, you're replacing stud for stud on the defensive side of the ball there. I also found it interesting that the blurb didn't make any note about Notre Dame. Like, you're going to have BYU up there in the category of making the college football playoff and not mention the fact that they're playing Notre Dame this year, which is, to me, a big factor in all this. If you think BYU is capable of finishing 11th in the country, that is one of, if not the starting point on talking about the season. Maybe it would be bullet point number 2 for me if I'm talking about BYU. It's, hey, kept Kalani Sitake, brought virtually everybody back despite losing the defensive coordinator and another good defensive coach. They get a shot at Notre Dame this year at home. A team that 2 years in a row has been not given enough at-large consideration, that has a legitimate beef, a legitimate gripe about that. Now they get a chance to go prove it against Notre Dame. Fighting Irish, Golden Domes, the helmet, all that stuff. I would have thought that was worthy of being included in there. But anyway, so assuming that you don't get a Duke to come in and screw things up, right, because they would automatically be in this year had they won the ACC championship this year like they did last year with the new rules. That could knock BYU out even if they are number 11, but in all likelihood, them being at 11 here would get them into the playoffs. So a little bit of respect, which I will say this. Here's another key, BYU fans, about all this. You ready to deal with expectations this year? Expectations are going to be a bit different, and that becomes more of a challenge in some ways as a program. A different challenge for sure. Like, you can say there were some last year, and I think like internally around Provo there certainly were, but especially after the Jake Retzloff thing happened, nationally I don't think there were very high expectations for BYU. I guess they did slip in the top 25 at the beginning of the year, but it certainly was not, hey, we're going to go win 12 games. This year, that's going to be the expectation. I mean, this is like ESPN. All their guys are using this. Like, this is their content piece of the way too early top 25 that is being regenerated, repurposed across the site. They've got you 11th. They've got you 11th. They've got you in the playoff as of where it stands right now. So this is an important year to prove them right. Prove them correct. You need to do that. And I'm not saying it's totally fair, by the way, right? I mean, so many teams have expectations like that on a given year. They go out and don't live up to those expectations. Of Florida State, I mean, even this year, like a Texas being somewhat disappointing after preseason number 1 and Arch and all that, they'll get the benefit of the doubt again. BYU will not. You let people down once you finally have some expectations, it's going to make a big negative impact. Unfortunately, that's just the reality of the situation. So probably something we're talking about more as the offseason rolls on and we head toward what next season is going to be like. What's funny here, though, I will point this out, BYU getting more respect in the SEC in some ways. Now, look, there are SEC teams ahead of BYU in this poll, obviously, but I made note of the fact that Oklahoma was at number 12 in this, so the Sooners are technically left out. They're sitting there at number 12, and then LSU, who has, Texas Tech gets a lot of crap for putting together like a Big 12 all-star team, right? LSU took 3 of the best players from the Big 12 in Jordan Seaton, Colorado offensive tackle, Jace Brown, K-State receiver, Sam Levitt, Arizona State quarterback, LSU all the way down there at number 15. That's a fun one. Lane Kiffin at 15, 4 spots below the BYU Cougars. I do like that. I sure like seeing that. Now, the other question about all this is, okay, well, John, this is great, but you did tell me the other day there's a difference between BYU being ranked where they're at now or at the end of the season, but if it actually means a playoff spot is on the line, what would happen with the playoff selection committee or even like a Mark Schlabach or somebody from ESPN? Can you be cynical about would they do this? Really, if it gets in season? I still am cynical about that. I get it. But I will say this again is the key to the season. I think it's different this year in the fact that you have Notre Dame on the schedule. If you beat Notre Dame, then yes, I think this could be a legitimate thing. You could get the legitimate respect that you deserve as far as that goes. If you beat Notre Dame, that might give you enough leeway to then lose another regular season game on the schedule. If you're 11-2 again with a loss in the Big 12 title game to Texas Tech, especially if it's at least close, I think that Notre Dame game could give you benefit of the doubt there. So that is such a monster difference between 2026 and 2025 for BYU. So there you have it. Some early buzz for the Cougars. Good things for the Big 12, 2 projected college football playoff teams, again, in Mark Schlabach's way too early top 25. So click here if you want to learn how BYU can save the Big 12's reputation this season. You can probably see where I'm going with this. If you're watching live, don't worry about that. That is for the folks watching the clipped version of the video. Please do like the video, subscribe to the channel. Everybody filing in. I know I'm going a little bit earlier tonight than I typically do, so I appreciate that. I would also appreciate if you subscribe to the Open for Business Big 12 newsletter. It is ofbnews.com. That's ofbnews.com in order to do that. I've also got a national college football channel. You can find the link to that in the description of the video if you want to check out some national content from yours truly. Would really appreciate anybody doing that, hopping over and subscribing there. So here's another thing from ESPN. Who's going to be the next Indiana? You need to look no further than the Big 12, my friends. And don't take my word for it, okay? You can call me a Big 12 homer sitting here saying, oh, the next Indiana is in the Big 12. Take ESPN's word for it, okay? Because in this video, I'll tell you which Big 12 team that was terrible last year ESPN predicted to make the playoff, why I agree that that team has Indiana-level potential, and another Big 12 candidate to become the next version of the Hoosiers. Okay. So everybody realizes by now at this point, Indiana is a very special thing in college football. We have literally never seen anything like it. The ratings for the national championship game were off the charts, about as good as we've ever seen in the playoff era because largely of that story, right? People are enamored with this. Like Indiana's going to go 16-0 2 years after going 3-9. It's just breaking brains across the sport. It is breaking every preconceived notion that anybody has had about college football and what it takes to win and how much talent you have to have on your roster and how much pedigree you have to have. It's changed everything, totally shifted the paradigm. But can it be replicated? Can it be done again? I heard Josh Pate talking about this, and I thought it was so good. And now I'm forgetting the name of the guy. The man who ran the first 4-minute mile. I'm going to get this for you in just a second. That was a real paradigm shift moment. Roger Bannister, okay, in 1954. We have the Bannister effect, where Roger Bannister was the first person ever to break 4 minutes in a mile. He did it, and then all of a sudden a bunch of people did after him. So this feat that was considered impossible, once people saw, oh, hey, it is possible, then a bunch of others followed and did it. There's some kind of mental block to it, right? It was possible for one of the worst programs in college football history to win a national championship and to do it in just 2 years after going 3-9. That was always possible. We'd just never seen it done. So now that you've seen it done, will there be repeat Kurt Cignettis? Will there be repeat Indianas? And where are those teams going to come from? Look, I think there are a couple good Big 12 candidates for this, and I actually think it's really uncanny, some of these candidates, okay? First of all, it should be really encouraging to Big 12 fans that Indiana did do what they did. Now, I know they do have the backing of the Big Ten TV contract. They've got some extra money from that. Mark Cuban's now pumping money into their NIL operation, but they didn't get started with that. They still made the playoff a year after going 3-9 without the Mark Cuban infusion and with just the guys that Sig put together coming off of a 3-9 season. And remember, resources or not, if you check the 24/7 Sports talent composite, Indiana had the 72nd best roster in the country, the 72nd most talented roster in the country this year. That talent composite is based on what these players were coming out of high school. So, yeah, is that a somewhat flawed metric? Sure. But, that's what your Bud Elliott's of the world push all the time. Blue chip ratio, talent composite, like that. That's what you roll with. Indiana had the 72nd best roster. That 3 spots below Tulane. John Summerall at Tulane had a more talented roster this year, according to the 24/7 Sports talent composite. All right. So that's a positive for Big 12 fans, regardless of how much money they get from the Big Ten TV deal. That team can turn it around and make the playoff and then win a national championship. That should give you hope. You know what else should give you hope? The last team that got really close and basically did the same thing for a year, they pulled a half Cignetti, was Arizona State. Arizona State went from 3-9 to 11-3 and within an eyelash of the semifinal of the college football playoff. How many times you've heard me say 4th and 13 away from beating Texas, right? I heard Cam Scadaboo talking about that recently, and he was complaining about the call on the catch that the Texas kid made. Anyway, I had to chuckle. I was happy that Cam Scadaboo still thinks about that because it haunts me, and I'm not even an ASU fan, right? But that was a half Cignetti. That was pulling off the first part of the Cignetti, and that was even advancing further into the playoff than Cignetti did when he got bounced in the first round. Arizona State got a bye and then damn near made the semifinal. And hey, the last surprise team to make a national championship game was TCU in 2022 before Indiana, right? That was the last surprise team really to get there. So I have 2 teams. I think it's fair to say that team could absolutely come from the Big 12, the next Indiana. And I've got 2 teams that I think fit that bill. ESPN agrees with me on one of them. Here's one that ESPN did not mention. I think it's Houston, okay? Not enough people are talking about this. Not enough people are talking about Houston and the comparison of Willie Fritz and Kurt Cignetti. Guys, it is uncanny, okay? All right? Clip this. It's uncanny. Kurt Cignetti, 64 years old. Willie Fritz at Houston, 65 years old. They both have a near identical background in addition to being guys toward the end of their career. These are not young up-and-coming head coaches, but they are up and coming because they won at the Division II level and they won at the FCS level. They won big at schools nobody had heard of, and so they weren't hot, sexy names coming up that way, but they both won everywhere they've been. Willie Fritz just doesn't say Google me, but Cignetti won at IUP, IUP, won at Elon, won at James Madison. Willie Fritz won at Blinn Community College, Central Missouri, Sam Houston, Georgia Southern, Tulane, and now Houston. And they both just win big, win big, win big. Willie Fritz took over a 4-8 program. He got him to 10-3 within 2 years. Kurt Cignetti took over a 3-9 program. They went 11-2 and then won the national championship. Like, it's the same profile. These guys are scary similar. Okay. If you're talking about an algorithm that would suggest related content, if it saw Kurt Cignetti and then saw Willie Fritz, it would send you Willie Fritz next in your doom scroll because they're the same thing. If you like one, you're going to like the other. And now you plug in the profile of what this Houston team actually is. Connor Wegman's back. Amari Thomas back at receiver. They pull in a top 10 portal class according to On3. And if we're talking about the offense, they really helped refuel the running game with a couple. I mean, their studs in that class are a couple of offensive linemen and a running back. So you feel like the offense really has a lot of meat to it, a lot of pop to it. And then a defense, dude, if you're giving me a Willie Fritz defense, I'm going to trust that it's going to be pretty damn good. I'm just going to take my chances that a Willie Fritz defense will be pretty darn good. He lost Sheil Wood after year one, his defensive coordinator, a big-time bright spot from that 4-win year in year one, and it didn't matter. Texas Tech money whipped him fine. We'll just go out and win 10 games and still put together a top-tier Big 12 defense. He's going to continue to do that. So I love Houston here as having the potential to be a team that people are just like shocked is in the college football playoff. I'm not necessarily calling for a national championship for Houston, but I think that's a team that could really shock some people. I'm going to get to the other one with ESPN here in just one quick second, okay? Please do subscribe to the channel. Please do like the video. I'm trying to get to 30K subs. I would appreciate your subscription. Okay, the one that ESPN would agree on, the one that ESPN has in one instance predicted to make the college football playoff next year. Next year, okay? That would be your 1-11 Oklahoma State Cowboys. And this is from Bill Connolly, who was picking the college football playoff based on a formula, right? So it was like, hey, in the SEC, the teams making the playoff have either been Georgia or somebody who beat Kirby Smart in the regular season. Or in the Big 12, I'm trying to remember his specific formula in the Big 12. It was either follow the money, which obviously last year with Texas Tech, right? Or somebody that had a losing season the year before, I think was that. Anyway, he picked Texas Tech, which won't shock you from the Big 12. But for the at-large spots, he said one of them is always somebody who had a losing season the year before. And that's where Oklahoma State got slotted in by Bill Connolly here. 1-11 last year to the college football playoff. Here is Bill Connolly's reasoning. He says, hear me out. Were the Cowboys abjectly hopeless in 2025? Absolutely. They plummeted to 1-11 with what was their worst team since 1963 per S&P Plus. But they made a potentially dynamite hire in Eric Morris, one of my favorite hires of the cycle, and he has basically imported his dynamite North Texas offense, bringing in 17 former Mean Green players, including stars Drew Mestamaker, Caleb Hawkins, and Wyatt Young. Oklahoma State will score plenty of points in 2026, and if the Cowboys' close game luck flips as well, they could be a huge turnaround story. That was one thing he pointed out that I thought was good. Bad close game luck last year for the Pokes. That is something a lot of people, you'll see Phil Steele point to that can flip and be better. They are pulling so where Willie Fritz in Houston hit this like similar coach who just wins everywhere and has the same type of background. On the flip side, Oklahoma State's trying to pull the, hey, we'll bring up a bunch of guys from where this dude coached before and win right away with them because of the continuity and like, I know these guys can play. And so that's what's happening here, but to a greater extent, they have way more North Texas players than James Madison players that followed Cignetti to Indiana. So that's what Oklahoma State is doing here and why they draw this comp. And I've said it before, I'll say it again. I mean, it just makes all the sense in the world that like if you're going to have to pull 54 kids out of the portal, having 17 that played with your head coach the year before helps a lot. I mean, in some ways that's like you could almost reduce the portal number. You could take 54 minus 17 because those guys played for the same staff last year. It's essentially like you had them in your program last season. I would make that point there that certainly softens the blow. It lessens it. Okay. Now, another thing pointed out by Bill Connolly, I mean, he just loves Eric Morris. He's good he'll have a good offense. I mean, I don't think there's any doubt about that. Quarterback whisperer, Coach Patrick Mahomes at Texas Tech, Cam Ward at Incarnate Word turns him into a number 1 pick. Drew Mestamaker at North Texas, totally out of nowhere to being one of the top flight kids in the portal, and has won big at places that haven't had a ton of success in North Texas and Incarnate Word. That's another part of Connolly's real reasoning here. And so as much as you could look at it and say, hey, man, I don't know, 1-11, that's even worse than Indiana was. This is different. Oklahoma State's got the bones of a winning football program. We all know that. It's been a rough last 2 years, but they were in the Big 12 championship game 3 years ago. Yeah, Indiana was 3-9, but that's a program that was, I mean, bottom 5 in college football from a Power 4 standpoint. So Oklahoma State has much more. They have a lot more that's ready to like put some rocket boosters on you there in theory, right? Obviously, Indiana took off like a rocket anyway because of Cignetti and who he is. I'm not saying I think Eric Morris is that, but I think Eric Morris is a good coach. I think it's a good hire, and I think there's a lot there to help boost you forward in year one. So I can see where you'd say, hey, the ingredients seem to be here. Whether or not they're all going to mix together right in the blender and come out correctly, I don't know. But the correct ingredients seem to be there. And by the way, in this playoff that Bill Connolly put together, Oklahoma State would be the 11 seed, and they would travel to Texas A&M in the first round of the college football playoff. How fun would that be? You get an old school Big 12 matchup between Oklahoma State and Texas A&M. That's pulling at my heartstrings, my friends. That is a man, Bill Connolly, after my own heart with that. Okay, click here if you want to learn how Oklahoma State resurrected its program to be potentially playoff worthy. That's not for you live folks. That's for the folks watching the clipped version of the video. Appreciate you live folks for being here. I know I've got some super chats to get to, so let's do that, shall we? Click the $ below the chat box if you would like to submit a super chat for tonight's show. Otherwise, just like and subscribe. All that's totally free. It's really, really helpful. I'm getting close to 30K subs. Throw a party and get to 30K. I appreciate all of you guys. It's been a great, great year of growth here on the channel. Let's talk to Big 12 Little 12. Big 12 Little 12 says, and thank you for your support, my friends. Sports media has discounted Utah for 2026 because of losing Witt, but I think there is a massive disconnect with what Scally has done over the years to coach up 2 stars to the NFL draft and create a culture second to none. Well, I will point out, Big 12 Little 12, and maybe you weren't here when I got this because this was at the beginning of the show, but in this top 25, the way too early top 25 from Mark Schlabach at ESPN, he had Utah 25th. And I have seen, where did I see the other day? I saw somebody that still had them up in the top like 15, 16, 17. It was something like that. So I think there is some. But I would also point out, hey, I'm with you. Like, I get the vision. I totally get the vision on Morgan Scally being the younger, more dynamic, more cut out for this world, this environment of college football type of coach. Guy who's just a more dynamic personality than Kyle Whittingham. Will probably have, I know there's been complaints about like Whittingham, the offenses that have been under Whittingham, and maybe Scally will be more conducive to that. I get it. I see the vision, man. I'm here for it. I get it. But he is a first-time head coach. Like there's going to be some unease about that. Like people are going to be wondering about that, questioning that a bit. Like, which I think is fair. I mean, it's the same thing for any first-time head coach. You don't know. I mean, we just talked about Curt Cignetti. Nobody was throwing Indiana into the top 25 his first year, and he went to the college football playoff. So I understand where Utah fans are coming from. I definitely believe that Scally had opportunities to be a head coach somewhere else, and that was a part of the sense of urgency that led to eventually Kyle Whittingham leaving. And, I don't need to rehash the way everything went down, but like I understand. Like Alex Markham talked about that on the channel not that long ago, and I'm sorry, guys. I'm totally in belief that he had those types of opportunities, but he does need to prove it as a head coach. He needs to prove it now. So I think just a year of having an 8-9 win season, and I think a lot of people would be right back on board. Like, okay, this was about the Utah program, not just Kyle Whittingham. But just my 2 cents, Big 12, Little 12. I'm very, very interested, very intrigued to see where it goes. I think they've got a lot of good with Devin Dampier, Bird Ficklin, and Wayshawn Parker coming back. That's going to be a huge lift because I trust that Scally will figure out the defense. Norin, what's up, Norin? Norin says, I think you're politely stating the ESPN setup. By propping up BYU when Notre Dame wins, they can marginalize the Big 12. That is a defining game for the conference next year. Love the show. It is totally a defining game for the conference. Like, I hate to be over the top. I hate to make too much of something, but I think you are right. I mean, that you just don't get that opportunity as the Big 12 anymore these days. Getting Notre Dame to come to one of your venues, it's just not happening often. A team of that caliber, it's just not happening often. By the way, Oregon goes to Stillwater next year, so that's another one in the same vein. I should have mentioned that if we're talking about Oregon, Oklahoma State in the playoff. But yeah, that will be a game with all eyes on it, especially because like Notre Dame will need the strength of that. So I would say by propping up BYU, it's not just they can marginalize the Big 12. They can use it to pump up Notre Dame, man. College Football Playoff Selection Committee, if you want to be really cynical about it, like they're like, yeah, please make BYU as highly ranked as possible so that we can credit Notre Dame with a top 10 win there, right? Like, you know, there are all sorts of ways that you could be very cynical with this. So I understand where you're coming from on that for sure, Norin. Here's the bottom line, Norin. Just beat them. Just beat them. BYU, go beat them. Bear Bachmeier, take care of business. Run all over them. Have another couple of iconic plays for that game. By the way, boy, do I want to be at that game. I'm just now thinking about that. I got to get on that. I got to talk to my guys over at BYU, make sure I can get credentialed for that game. That's probably going to be a tough one. But yeah, can't wait for that. Norin, thank you for being here, my friend. I appreciate you. Smuggy Thornton. Hey, Smuggy Thornton. Thank you for your support. I'm going to check and see here up the chat if I missed. Doesn't look like it. If you had something, Smuggy Thornton, I would appreciate it. If you just pop in the chat, I will make sure that I get there. David, with their Ivy League QB, where's TCU next year? Well, according to the top 25 from ESPN, once again, I will reference, I was positively surprised to see TCU at number 20. With a mention of getting rid of Kendall Briles, bringing in UConn's offensive coordinator, who lit it up this year, and perhaps bringing some more toughness to TCU's offense. Look, a big part of the problem for TCU this year was just the inconsistency of the running game. I mean, we know Josh Hoover was great. Eric McAllister was awesome. Manjack, great. The no-gloves receiver. But they struggled to run the ball consistently, and it put too much on Hoover, and sometimes he got turnover prone. So I think a more balanced offense could be a very good thing for TCU. And frankly, with Sonny Dykes, like obviously that first year was a great job, but I don't think of TCU as being like a tough physical team. I think they need a little bit more toughness and physicality to them, even on the offensive side of the ball. TCU definitely can be a top 25 team. I think TCU is always going to have a roster that's plenty talented to do that. I wouldn't predict them to make the playoff, and I didn't include them in the list of like who could be the next Indiana because, like, I mean, TCU played for the national championship 3 years ago, right? Like, it's not a downtrodden program. We've seen them win 12 games multiple times over the last 10 to 15 years. I think a top 25-ish team, yeah. And if those tweaks actually work out well, maybe changing the entire philosophy with it's Craig. Jaden Craig. Yeah, Jaden Craig, the transfer quarterback from Harvard. I'm open to it, man. Josh Hoover, I think, was a good quarterback, but I could see how this works out better for TCU in the end. So anyway, I appreciate you, David. I appreciate you and your passion for the Frogs. That's my read on TCU as of right now. Okay. Please like and subscribe. Thank you, everybody in there. Shout out to my guy TJ that I see in there, trying to encourage you all to subscribe. Listen to the man, okay? He's a smart dude. All right. We do have yet another example of an anti-Big 12 crusade it's not being talked about a whole lot, but it's reared its ugly head. Are these behemoth recruiting sites all conspiring against the Big 12? Because it sure looks like it once again. And I try hard not to be conspiracy guy. But I saw this one happen. I saw it happen with my own two eyes, and I thought, dude, this is not going to help. This is not going to help you beat the case in this video. I will show you the latest example of this. I'll point out a couple other egregious recent examples and answer the question like, hey, is this really a big thing holding the Big 12 back? Plus, we even got one guy who just exposed the entire game that's being run here by the recruiting sites and the SEC and Big Ten, okay? So here's the latest example. We talked a lot about Kyle Whittingham and Michigan and everything that happened, the fallout of leaving Utah. He took 7 coaches, bunch of high-profile players, some of the most talented on the roster, Smith Snowden, J.J. Buchanan, John Henry Daly, like a lot of the roster that was like frontline name guys, transferred to Michigan to go play for Kyle Whittingham. So that was painful. But what stood out to me was it seemed like the most painful to the Utah fan base, and Kyle Markham, even Alex Markham said the same thing when he was on here. Sorry, Alex. The most painful one was actually stealing the number 1 recruit in the 2026 class for Utah, and that was Salase Moa. Huge coup to get him away from Tennessee. He was at one point committed to Tennessee. Utah flipped him while Kyle Whittingham was still there in December. He's the number 1 player in the state. It's a big deal. Some places have him as the number 1 athlete in the country. This is a big, big get. He gets on campus. He starts taking classes and then decides, well, maybe I'll go to Michigan. Okay. And this is what drew the ire of Mark Harlan, the athletic director at Utah, who then tweeted about it, took a lot of crap for it, probably rightfully so, right? It turned into a whole big thing, but that tells you how painful this one was, right? You lost this guy, your number 1 recruit, to Kyle Whittingham. This is the latest example of it, though, my friends. He's a 4-star recruit, according to Rivals. But now, guess what? Things have changed. Please subscribe to the channel, like the video. Here you go. Things have changed now. No longer a 4-star recruit since Salase Moa is a Michigan Wolverine, okay? This actually pointed out by a BYU fan on Twitter here, but you see that Rivals Michigan athlete Salase Moa ranks number 30 and 5 stars in the final 2026 Rivals 300. So they do their final update, and in the final Rivals 300, wow, look at that. He's gained a 5th star. How about that? You know, not going to Utah, not going and playing in the truck stop conference anymore. He's going to play in the Big Ten in the Big House. Well, he must be a 5-star recruit. Then, if he's worthy of Michigan, of course. If he's a Michigan man, no Michigan man can be a lowly 4-star. It's crazy, guys. It's crazy. And I know Rivals has lost some of its punch. It's not quite what it used to be. But it sure is frustrating to see this. It sure is frustrating. And all you have to do is go look in the comments of that tweet to find multiple other recent examples that people are pointing out. Ryder Lyons, I know, is one that BYU fans will immediately go to. Ryder Lyons dropping a star by some services after committing to BYU instead of, say, Oregon, who was also after him very, very hotly. Jet Tamala, Iowa State quarterback commit. This was back when Matt Campbell was still there, but he was committed to Iowa State, was a 4-star quarterback, high-level recruit. But then he flipped to Alabama. And what do you suppose happened after Jet Tamala flipped to Alabama? He got a 5th star and is now a 5-star player. So I'm not even telling you here that this is all like a coordinated effort, but it definitely has ramifications that hurt the Big 12, okay? I don't think this is a bunch of people like that have a group chat from all the big sites. I don't think like Shannon Terry and whoever runs 24/7 Sports now are like texting like, all right, you see that? Like, make sure to drop this guy right now. He's committed to Michigan. I don't think it's anything like that. I just think it's the same thing that the Big 12 deals with all the time. It's this like unconscious bias toward the Big 10 and the SEC, right? And it does all wind up keeping the Big 12 down, even as I say that in the end, what really matters is who's pumping out the most talent to the NFL, and the Big 10 and the SEC still dominate that. Now, part of that is they've sucked away so many of the big name conferences. They have such a monopoly on those that, like, yeah, of course, the numbers are going to run up. I mean, they've just added more teams there, right? Like teams that are churning out generally more talent. The easy math is going to tell you they'll put more guys into the NFL. But I mean, that is ultimately, if you're going to measure a conference by talent, that's the ultimate tail of the tape on the talent, because the NFL doesn't care about stars or whatever. They just want to find dudes who can play. Okay. And that is true. I mean, the Big 12 is still pretty far behind there, but that doesn't mean that this doesn't still affect the Big 12. And I wanted to point this out because this reply came in and I thought, well, this guy's like kind of saying the quiet part out loud, right? I mean, he's just giving away what the entire game is here. So this lovely young gentleman, Brady, says a top tier athlete plus Michigan or Tennessee development and experience will project to a better NFL prospect than a Big 12 player. It's that simple. Now, as you can see, the kids would say he got ratioed. 16 replies to only 3 likes. That's getting ratioed pretty hard there. But his point here is like, well, yeah, if they're projecting what this guy's going to do at the NFL level, the fact that he went to Michigan or Tennessee to get that level of development, resources, et cetera, is going to make him a better NFL player. So there's the argument. And I guess that's what maybe some of these people would tell you. But like, I don't know, it's the same coach, man. He was going to be the same staff, like literally the same staff would have coached him at Utah as opposed to now Michigan. Like it really playing in the just playing in front of 100,000 people, playing in the big house makes that big of a difference. Like that's why the star rating goes up. And hey, if that really is the case, that exposes how this is. It's just a system that the Big 12 can never win. Like you can recruit the same guy and they're just automatically going to knock you down. And then your blue chip ratio gets worse, which means that Bud Elliott is never going to talk about you as a national championship contender, or people who believe in that same system are never going to vote you very high in the polls, which is going to hurt you when it comes to college football playoff time, like BYU, who's never starting with the high expectations, right? That has a tangible impact on the conference when you're not pulling in more of these blue chip prospects. And if this effect is really happening to you over and over again. And I would also say, I talked about Indiana earlier in the show. Indiana blows some of this up right in its face. I mean, 72nd most talented roster in the country, according to the 24/7 talent composite. Just went 16-0, blasted Alabama, blasted Oregon, won the national championship. So that flies in the face a bit of what these recruiting rankings are saying. None of these guys on Indiana's roster were 5-star highly recruited players. But yet there they are, just blowing people up. It didn't matter that they weren't at Michigan getting developed there, right? I mean, there is plenty of evidence to the contrary here. I acknowledge that, yes, because there are so many of the bigger powerhouse programs in the Big Ten and the SEC, they're going to churn out more NFL talent. But this is totally a system that is set up to harm the Big 12 and, to some extent, the ACC. Probably not Miami, Florida State, Clemson, but the rest of the ACC for sure, I think, feels that too. You know, it's a haves and have-not system. It's another way that the Big 12 is held back, and it's very frustrating. It's very, very frustrating. But hey, speaking of the SEC and Big 10 rigging things against everybody else, will their current power struggle wind up crushing the Big 12? Click here to find out. That's for the folks watching the clip version. If you're watching live, I appreciate you. I've got one more topic for you tonight before I've got to hop out and go. Thank you to everybody for being here. If you want to drop in a super chat, click the $ below the chat box in order to do that. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel as we push toward 30K, and subscribe to the Open for Business Big 12 newsletter. I've also got my national channel, OFB College Football, that you can find the link to in the description of this video. I would appreciate a sub over there as well. Okay, SEC Big 10, buckle up. Everyone's dunking on the Big 10 and the SEC for not agreeing on the future of the playoff, but buried in all of that, in the latest reporting, I'm worried the Big 12 is making a huge mistake here. I am concerned about that. Will this come back to haunt Brett Yormark, or is the Big 12 simply standing up for what's good and pure in the sport when no one else will? In this video, I'll answer those questions for you and give you the unbelievable, the quite hilarious quotes that are coming out of the state of the college football playoff from others outside of the Big Ten and the SEC. All right. So the temperature in the room right now is a lot of people really hot with the SEC and the Big Ten. Not happy, not thrilled with what they're doing right now. They have corralled all the power. They have absolute power in terms of directing the future of the college football playoff and directing the future of the sport. Right? but yet they can't agree on what they're doing. They are butting heads right now. They are not getting along. These are two big egos in the room, and no one seems to be budging right now, especially as the SEC is kind of like the old money here. They've been the establishment for a long time, and the Big Ten has now won 3 straight national championships. So why would they give in to anything that the SEC says when the SEC hasn't even played for a national title and the Big Ten has won 3 straight? They've got plenty of leverage there. They're probably not going to give in. So they missed the deadline, the January 23rd deadline, to extend the playoff to 16 next year or to 24, which is what the Big Ten wants. It seems everybody in the room wants it to expand, which, I mean, look, I don't think that's necessary. I don't agree with that. But everybody in the room wants it to expand. They just can't agree on what to do because of the SEC and Big Ten. So here are some quotes that Brett McMurphy gathered and compiled from On3. All right. Now, I'm going to get to the part of his article that has what I think is potentially a big mistake for Brett Yormark in the Big 12. But first, let's take a moment to enjoy and savor these quotes. All right. Quote, the SEC and Big Ten wanted the power to make a decision, and now they can't even come to a decision. That's an industry source. Quote, it's disgusting. Another industry source said, it's disgusting. Quote, the SEC and Big Ten wrestled the power away and now have fumbled the opportunity to expand to 16 or more teams, a source said. They fumbled it. They fumbled. I feel like that's like a Gen Z term, right? They fumbled. The SEC and Big Ten fumbled it. Quote, they basically bullied their way into an agreement that provides them a lion's share of revenue and control, and yet they can't work together because of their egos. Look, all of this is true and very fair. I think we can all see this and realize this, and it's in some ways just validating to see that everybody that's in the room feels the same way as I think most of us on the outside. Like, come on, guys. You can't agree on anything when you wrestled away all this power. Like, what are we even doing here? All of this is very fair to take these shots at. But I'm concerned about one thing that gets buried in there as we start to have some fun with those comments, man. Let's get to how this affects the Big 12, okay? And please do like the video, subscribe to the channel as I push toward 30K subs. I appreciate all of you guys. All right. This is one line in the story from Brett McMurphy. It says, not that it matters, but the remaining 8 leagues also prefer the SEC's 16-team model, but they are the silent majority. And that's where my concern creeps in, okay? So this is the 5+11 playoff format. The 5 automatic qualifiers, your 5 conference champions, and then 11 at-large bids, which Brett Yormark supported instead of the 4-4-2-2 plan from the Big Ten, which would have required the Big 12 and ACC to sign off on being half as valuable as the SEC and Big Ten. That was a non-starter for obvious reasons. But now the Big Ten wants 24. And one of the proposals they have thrown out there about 24 has been everybody gets 4 auto bids. Big 12, Big 10, ACC, SEC. Everybody gets 4 auto bids. If that's the case, I don't know why the Big 12 and the ACC, for that matter, are not like rushing to support that. And that's what I don't get here. And this is where I worry about what this means for the Big 12's future, because that's just a golden ticket to having more playoff access than you would otherwise get. I mean, there's no chance, whatever the number gets up to. I don't know how you would get 4 like at-large Big 12 or 1 conference champion and 3 at-large Big 12s in there ever, under any circumstance. That's a golden ticket, man. Charlie, take it from Willie and run if you're getting that golden ticket, dude. So I guess the question is, well, what's going on here? I mean, is the Big 12 just being a real steward of the game? Are they trying to do what's best for the overall of the sport? Because I think most people would agree we don't need 24 teams in a playoff. Like, I understand why that's being proposed. We don't need that. And at a certain point, you're going to get diminishing returns on the regular season. It will lose some value, and I hate that. Like, college football should be a largely regional sport where the regular season matters more than anything, and rivalries are preserved and all that stuff. But we move so far away from that. And if you're the Big 12, it's just simply inarguable that the 24-team playoff with 4 auto bids for your conference is the best thing you could ever imagine and ever get. So why is it that the Big 12 still, according to this reporting, is in line with everybody else saying, hey, we'll take 5+11. That's what we're going to support here. I don't think, I know I raised this question. I don't think it's some altruistic point of view here from everybody else. Like, okay, since the Big Ten is going to be crazy and trying to do something that's not great for the sport, we'll stand up for the good of the sport and the good of all of this. And we'll say, nah, even though that would be better for us, we're not going to take it. I don't think that it's that. I don't. Nobody in the college football space right now acts in an altruistic way. That's one of the biggest problems. We don't have anybody doing that. You need a commissioner that would do that, but I digress. We don't have it. So what's actually going on here? I would think that there are some politics at play. Perhaps it is, well, look, I don't even know that I could say I think. I'm sure. It's just worrying about the dynamics and the politics of what's going on in the room. Like, if you go too all in on this, does that mean it's just like too transparent? Like, oh, of course those guys are going to go all in on this, and it just turns the SEC off even more? Does it hurt your legitimacy, your standing, your negotiating power on other things in the room? Because how could you possibly think that you would deserve 4 auto bids? Maybe some of it too is just a credibility thing. For Brett Yormark made the big point over and over again when he was talking about 5+11 and why he would support that over 4-4-2-2. He said over and over again that you got to earn it. These should not just be automatic bids handed out. You have to earn it if you're going to make the college football playoff. So maybe it's that preserving credibility thing. I mean, the ACC still standing with it too with the 5+11 thing. And the ACC didn't get a whole lot of love in the college football playoff this past year, right? I mean, it's not like the ACC is lighting the world on fire there either. And it may just be the other thing that I would consider here. It may just be a total resignation to the fact that, like, hey, the SEC is never going to go for that anyway. So if we waste time and energy campaigning for this, and we know it's not something that like the SEC is ever going to entertain, the Big Ten's extending an olive branch here to the Big 12 and ACC to try and get something done, but the SEC is just never going to buy into that, then maybe it does more harm than good for us to push for that and just draw the ire of the SEC even more. Maybe you're worried about then that pushing we've seen the threats from the SEC lately about just leaving and doing their own thing, only playing conference games, only having their own playoff. All of that, as ridiculous as it sounds, maybe it's an effort not to push too close to that. I'm certainly understanding if that's the case. Like, I don't love that that's the case and where we're at in college football and college sports and all that, but I could understand if that's the case. So I see there are some avenues here where you could certainly make me think, all right, I get it, Big 12, but I do. It's like somebody teased you a little bit with that 4 auto bids, man. If you're not going to just take that and run with it, I don't know what you're doing. Okay, so speaking of, I just mentioned it. Could the SEC break off and do its own thing? Is that a legitimate possibility? Click here to find out. That, ladies and gentlemen, is for everybody watching the clipped version. If you're here live, I appreciate you all. Real quick, I'm going to squeeze in Alan before I have to run. Alan says, John, loved the KUK State game, but hated to see the last dunk. Glad to hear Self-Voice the same. Tough game with BYU coming up, Rock Chalk Jayhawk, Alan. It's going to be an awesome atmosphere on Saturday for sure at Allen for that. That's going to be crazy for BYU. Stoked to watch that game, just like I was stoked to watch Arizona BYU earlier this week. Look, on the last dunk, frankly, Alan, I kind of don't care. I'm so apathetic about Jerome Tang basketball at this point. And you just had a bunch of hired mercenaries that didn't really have the pride to care that Kansas was dunking on them at the end of the game like that. So, like, I don't know, man. It doesn't really bother me. Whatever. So many changes that need to be made, but I got about 18 million reasons why they're probably not going to happen. So tough times for me, Alan, but congratulations to your Jayhawks, and I appreciate you being here. I do appreciate that support as always. Thank you for everybody hanging out tonight on the Thursday show. Please do subscribe to the channel if you have not subscribed. So many of you watch. I mean, it's like 60-70% of the views not subscribed. It helps me out if you do subscribe, and we are getting closer to 30,000. So thank you. Make sure you're signed up for the Open for Business Big 12 newsletter, ofbnews.com. It's totally free. Hits your inbox twice a week. You got one. Head into your inbox bright and early tomorrow morning. And yeah, just like and subscribe. Check out the OFB College Football channel. Ton of ways to get more content and support what it is that I'm doing here. With that, I bid you adieu. Thank you, everybody, for hanging out tonight. Take care, and I will talk to you all soon.